So thank you, everybody, for coming to Coho BC's Conversations with Co-Owners. My name is Noam Dolgan, and I'm here with David Hale, who you'll meet a little later, from the Coho BC team. And we're delighted to have a bunch of you here for this really exciting topic and to hear some amazing stories from people who are living this life and who are pioneering in this space and can share with us some of their successes and some of their challenges and how they've overcome them. So we'll just start with a quick introduction. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that we do live here in what we call BC, but it is the ancestral, unceded, and historic homelands of many, many different peoples who stewarded this land for many generations. And now we take that responsibility as landowners and stewards very seriously, and trying to create, a good relationship to land, a good relationship to people, to other people, and to each other. And so we appreciate that history, and it's important to acknowledge it. So what is Coho BC? What's this organization that has brought us here today? Coho BC works to promote co-ownership as a viable and valuable housing option for people here in British Columbia, to provide resources and professional support to assist groups going through the co-ownership process, to assist in the creation of co-ownership groups through a dating pool, and chances to meet other like-minded individuals or families to create co-buying groups. And we work to facilitate the resale of shared property interests to other potential buyers and partners. So really trying to set people up for success in their co-ownership endeavors, and to assist in the, in creating more of this and transitioning them and all levels of the co-ownership game. So who we are is a collection of professionals, realtors such as myself, lawyers, builders, financial institutions, architects, mediators, really all the people you would need to help set you up, all with experience and expertise in collective housing and co-ownership. So don't reinvent the wheel, use the experts, and make sure that you're doing it right. This is not a uniquely BC idea. We're part of an international movement. These are just some of the many organizations moving into this space. Groups from the United States, Eastern Canada, Australia, the UK, and we see press coming out of this from other countries as well. It's really anywhere, which is pretty much everywhere, where housing prices are out of control and where people are feeling more and more socially isolated, and folks want to make better housing, hopefully for less money. We see people popping up to help fill and support this space. It's actually a more popular movement than we might think, and growing in popularity every day. Recent studies have shown that basically 50% of non-owners see co-ownership as one of their best pathways into home ownership. The numbers, of course, change based on your demographic and age, with 34% in the most recent survey of people 55 plus open to co-ownership, and up to 69% of people in the millennial and Gen Z generations seeing this as really the pathway that they might need. People are doing this with family, with friends, and of course with strangers as well. So who am I? Once again, my name is Noam Dolgan. I'm a realtor here in the Metro Vancouver area, who specializes in co-ownership, in sustainable living and green homes, first-time home buyers, really just real homes for real people, and outside the box real estate thinking. Before I got into real estate, I worked in environmental education and institutional greening and community engagement and development. So when I was in real estate looking at how to place people into housing that supported them socially, environmentally, and economically, co-ownership became an obvious pathway for many of my clients. and prompted myself in combination with others to launch this initiative. We also have with us today David Hale, who is the founder of Shared Home Ownership Victoria, with all the 30 years experience in the real estate industry. And as they like to say in the 80s ads, he's not just a founder, he's also a client, having sold 2/3 of his home in 2020. So we'll hear from David a little bit later about his experiences as a co-owner, but he's also here to help shed some light on it as a professional. But you're not here to hear me speak or to hear the basic introduction to co-ownership. We have those sessions. I encourage you to come to the what is real estate co-ownership and how can it work for me info session. Or if you're new to Coho, you'll be getting an introductory email when we add you to the mailing list, which has a video from one of those past presentations. So please do go into that, watch that video or attend that session to get much more detail in terms of the types of housing, the process, the what goes into a legal agreement, what goes into a financing structure, all those other pieces. But today we're really here to hear from our panelists, from the people living this type of arrangement. So we're so excited to have an amazing, diverse array of panelists with us today. Matt Fidler from the Horseshoe Bay Cottages, Colleen Nelson, Mary Jordan, and Margaret Huff. Sorry, Margaret. I forgot to add you guys into this slide. From the Rare Birds Co-op in Kamloops. We also have Ashley Pullman, Elizabeth Wilcox, two Vancouver co-owners who purchased about a year and a half ago, two families buying together. And we have David and Judy Hale, Victoria co-owners who, as I said, sold a share of their property to a friend, acquaintance, and is now living in that arrangement. So we're really delighted to have these people here with us today. And the nice diversity of types of co-ownership structures that we have here going on, from collective living to small group co-ownership and even large group co-ownership. And so I think they will bring a diverse array of interests and of experiences to help guide us in our potential. So we're going to get right into it. Our first speaker today is Matt Fidler from the Horseshoe Bay Cottages. Matt was part of a team of 8 individuals who purchased a unique property, 8 small homes between 400 and 600 square feet on 2 lots in Horseshoe Bay. These were historic vacation cottages that had been used by the steamboat industry 100 years ago as vacation properties for people working on the water there. And over the years had been converted into rental housing and other forums. And I will let Matt tell his story about how we brought the group together and what they've been able to accomplish since acquiring this property about 2 years ago now. So Matt, thank you for being here with us today. And I know it's always tough being first, but I'd love to hear a little bit about your property, your project, and your experience with what has worked, what have been challenges, and why you see this as being a great pathway for you and your community members. Matt, are you with us? I saw you come in.
Yeah, can everybody hear me and see me? Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I just can't see myself, but that's okay. So basically, thanks for the good intro, Noam. I really appreciate that. Basically, our story is a friend of mine told me about this opportunity, told me I needed to get in touch with Noam, and I happened to do it just a few days before he was hosting a meeting on site here in Horseshoe Bay to try to get some interest in a group of people together to try to buy the cottages. The wheels were already moving a little bit because there was some current tenants. And that's something that's really special is we have somebody who was a previous rental tenant here, single mother with her 2 boys, and we were able to essentially save her house, and she's now an owner of that house, which is amazing. And that was just the beginning of the journey. But the first time I saw this property, I'm like, we have to find some way to figure it out. A really big piece of the puzzle for us was that we had the right seller. And I know that sounds odd, but the amount of time and complexity, and Noam smiling because he knows exactly what I'm talking about, that it takes to put all this together required a seller that was on board with our plan, right? Because we needed to get the property under contract and have enough time to recruit people to join us and figure everything out and get a shareholders agreement in place. So luckily, the owner of the property had owned it since 1993, and it's a huge part of his life. He loves this property. He loves these cottages. He's put his heart and soul into them, and he would hate to see something else happen on this property. So when he heard that a group wanted to kind of revive them and make something happen here and keep the cottages in place, he was happy to be flexible with us and work with us. So, believe it or not, like Noam said, we have eight units here, 8 cottages, 8 households, but he's a big part of the puzzle as well. And also Noam for putting together the business model and kind of guiding us in how this could maybe be possible. Because it's, in my world, at least, it's kind of an expensive property, and it's not really something anyone in our group would be able to do on their own. But you just got to believe in the process and believe that together, maybe it is possible to make that happen.
All right, thank you. And yeah, Matt, please tell us a little bit about that process, about the bringing people in, about what has worked well for you guys in creating it, and what has worked well since you've been there.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pretty, you can see in the photo here, it's a pretty picturesque, pretty noteworthy property. So we were fortunate enough to get a little bit of press, including national press in the Globe and Mail. That almost brings too many people that you got to sift through, because you have 75 people that want to get in touch with you about opportunities. But we did get some of our members join that heard about the project through press, which is awesome. And that was a big piece of the puzzle, and just getting momentum, right? Something that I've always said to the group here is it feels impossible until it doesn't. And building momentum little by little, putting the pieces together and figuring out how it's all going to work. And every time someone joined or we got some renewed enthusiasm from people, it felt a little bit closer to our goal of making it a reality. We closed on the property in January 2021 or 2022, I suppose. No. So we'd had it at that point under contract for over 6 months, 6 to like nearly 7 months, basically. And we had to make a move. We found a way to close. And since then, then we owned it. We were able to kind of really uncover all the stones and find out what's really going on with these 100-year-old structures. And since then, I've been basically full-time renovating and improving them and making them more livable and upgraded so we can build our community here in nice places that we can take some pride in. And they've been rental properties for at least 50 years that we know of, and that leads to a lot of compromises with the structures and things like that. So we wanted to really get them to a place where it's a home ownership level of really taking more pride in them and having them upgraded and livable while still maintaining the character of the property. Great.
Now, going through that process with you, there was I think a lot of interesting stuff around kind of the roles people took, the fact that different people at different times stepped up to take the group to the next level. Can you talk a little bit about how it came to be and how different people were able to kind of step in and step out to really take it over the finish line, and really the teamwork that it took?
Yeah, for sure. It's not possible, a project like this, without teamwork. And we certainly have good days and bad days, but overall good days. It's a very positive thing. Like I said, Noam early on had to kind of guide us and show us some potential business models. We of course adapted them to what suits our group, but that might work in how people could come in at different levels and make this possible. Something I realized just based on my own personal circumstances is because of the pandemic and things like that, I was available from a work standpoint, and my house was getting redeveloped. I'd been given notice on that. I did have a year there left, so I had time, but I did need to find housing, and I'd lived there for 15 years. It was my long-term house in East Van, and we actually found a theme throughout our group that almost everyone was in a similar situation. Over half of our group had been displaced from their housing within the last year for one reason or another. And we were all pretty motivated to find long-term housing that we could take pride in and take the next step. We have people in our group that are really talented at sales and able to kind of do that side of things. I've taken on a lot of the construction, and I was kind of able to facilitate the group and all the moving parts. Certainly many people in the group are better with the kind of soft skills, community building, social side of things than I am. It's definitely a team effort. And every single day when I walk through our property, I see people out, especially now because it's summertime, people out tending to the garden. It's a pretty intense property to take care of in terms of the landscaping and the upkeeping. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of people here that are really passionate about that. And that's even why they joined the group, is because they wanted to be a part of that. So those are things that I would never be able to get around to. Taking care of this property on my own would be extremely daunting. It's much better to do it in a group, which what I mean by that is it's not a compromise that I'm doing in this as a group. It's actually better than doing it on your own, if that makes sense.
So with that in mind, what would you say, that you've been there a year and a half or a little more? What
Yeah.
have been the biggest advantages? Like what really makes it a wonderful living experience? And what have been the biggest challenges for you?
I mean, the advantage is it's a phenomenal setting and location and property that, I certainly wouldn't have access to on my own. And also, I know that it's been on nearly 2 years on our project, but I still feel like we're just getting going because we're not yet done the kind of upgrades to the units and getting everyone in place. We have all 8 units spoken for. We've built our group, but I still feel like once everyone kind of settles in, if that ever is a real time that comes, that's when the real focus on community building is going to start, right? And that's what I think we're all excited for. But it can't wait. It has to happen concurrently. And I think we all see building blocks of us getting better as a community, what works and what doesn't work in meetings, what processes work. I'll finish a long day of construction and someone will just see me walking up the path covered in dirt and be like, you look like you need some dinner, and just hand me a plate of dinner. It's kind of phenomenal, right? So yeah, I mean, we can certainly see glimpses of what this community could be shining through. And that's, I think, exciting for all of us. I guess I should say what doesn't work, what's the hardest. Ironically, and this might be a shock to some that are listening, it's kind of the same thing, because making all of that work and getting all the people and all the completely different personalities and everything working together, that's the hardest, most stressful thing. We've been through so much as a group now that we feel like we can overcome anything that comes our way in terms of external factors or do what we need to do. But all of us just getting along and getting on the same page and typically it's just misunderstandings or assumptions, right? Like there's never really anything that's actually bad that happens, but it's finding a way to reach that common ground as a community is the biggest challenge, as well as the biggest joy, if that makes sense.
So this is a fairly unique property, but I know that you've talked about trying to replicate this model. So talk a little bit about how you see what you're doing as replicable across the province.
Absolutely. And I would love to help others guide. I know what it takes to make this happen and how hard it is. And we've learned a lot of lessons here. I would love to help others facilitate projects like this. And I think there's some things that people might not think of, right? I truly believe that a big part of, when people talk about housing and how they can contribute to the housing situation, the housing crisis, if you will, often immediately we just start talking about rentals. How can we have rent controls? How can we have limits on rent increases? How can we build government subsidized housing? All of that's fantastic. This is obviously, what I'm doing is obviously a pretty niche project that's not going to be the solution for everybody. But we had a group of individuals here that were ready to make the jump to homeownership, wanting to make the jump to homeownership and take responsibility for their homes and put real money up and care for their homes and put in the work. But because of external factors beyond our control, none of us had access to be able to do that. So I really feel like it's almost like, I don't want to say subsidized, but it's non-market home ownership. And when you take everyone in our group out of the rental pool, you're opening up rentals for others. So I really feel like yes, it's niche, but it's a huge part of the solution. And, you know, seeing what we've seen over the last couple of years, I think that there's groups of people and there's properties that be right for this, but they might need a little help in the logistics and putting everything together and the connections of who to talk to about things like that. But I'm excited for it. I really think a lot of people could benefit from it.
Well, thank you so much for your overview and for being here. We're gonna hear from our 4 groups, and then we'll take some questions at the end. So I encourage folks to make some notes of questions they might have for Matt and for others as we go through this, to write them down yourself or to throw them in the chat, and we'll hear more from you at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Noam. Appreciate it.
So another group that's here with us today is the Rare Birds Co-op in Kamloops, another larger group of people who've come together, in this case on not an old historic building, but on a purpose-built newer building, and looking at a model of collectivity, trying to balance the advantages of some private space with the social and economic advantages of collective living. So Colleen, Mary, and Margaret, thank you so much for being with us today. And please let us know a little bit about your property, your community, and what your experiences have been there over the past 10 years, I believe it is, since that building was first built. And there's probably a whole history before that in getting the project off the ground.
Yeah, so I'll start because actually I'm the only one that's here right now that is a shareholder in this home, who was originally one of the original shareholders. So we started actually in 2011, and we spent about 3 years meeting and planning and looking. And it's one of the things that Matt was talking about was the business of getting the structural stuff done and then focusing on the community building. We did it the other way around. We really spent a lot of time on, community building aspects of, just what it was going to be like shared living. And one of the things in our research that we looked at was the failure rate with co-ops at that time when we were looking at that research, was people who didn't attend to the community aspects and all of the things around managing, communication and conflict and all those kinds of things that are just, that's human living together. I mean, you can't live with your family without running into those kinds of things. So we did focus a lot on that. Initially, we started off with an idea of 6 shareholders, and we looked at a budget that we thought we could manage. We were initially looking at renovating something. We wanted to be more closer to the downtown area, and we were sort of looking for property that we could renovate, but within about a year or so, we realized that to get the equity space that we felt we wanted and needed, that we needed to build. So we found this property, which we got a really good deal on, and we started construction in May of 2014 or 13. So it's 10 years last month or May that we actually started shoveling the ground. We moved in February of 2014. So we do have a unique model. We're really a co-living rather than co-housing situation. Everyone has we have 6 spaces that are equitable. Everyone has their own, about 400 square feet with a bathroom, private bath. But the rest is all common space, and we share a kitchen and a living room and all of the, so we live together like a large extended family. We don't cook separately or live separately. We live really like a family. And that's a fairly unique model, and it has a lot of challenges because a lot of people, they tend to gravitate, I think, more to the more traditional co-ops, I would say, where everyone has their own, their own units that are, they live independently with their own kitchens and that kind of stuff, and come together for cooperative activities, and often gardening and car shares or whatever it is that they're looking at in the co-ownership of their property. So that's so that's where we are, and we've really changed, I guess, over the 10 years. We started off with a mixed, and we've always had a mixed demographic to some extent, and sort of gender mix. We've had couples and retired people and working people, but in the last, it's actually almost 3 years, we've had a family living with us. So we have parents and 2 small children that are part of our community. So it's that's, we also have a couple of times we've had people who are investors that don't live, they're shareholders, but they don't live here. So, we really have, accommodated a lot of different kinds of things that I think in our original vision we weren't considering. But, we just, you go with the flow of what's going on and what needs to happen, right? So I don't know, is there anything else that we should add to that, you guys?
Just to say, we do have dinners together. And so about once a week, you'll cook the owners or the occupants will cook a dinner for whoever's there. And it's usually most of us. So you cook once a week, basically. And we have our own breakfasts and lunches that we make on our own. And we do share the food budget as well. So we buy all the food together, but you can ask for whatever you want.
So one other thing, as Margaret was talking, that I think might be, we have meetings twice a month, and one of our meetings is business focused, and the other meeting is what we call community wellness, and that's an opportunity to really check in with each other. We're all busy. We're busy people, and we just need to keep abreast of what's going on, not only in terms of the house, but just our lives. And we actually, when we started in 2011, we've met consistently, every couple of weeks at least. That's having the meetings I think it's been a very important aspect of, sometimes we think we maybe don't have to have a meeting, particularly maybe the community meetings, but it's always important.
So there's clearly big economic advantages to collective living and sharing a space. You don't have to pay for 6 different kitchens and 6 different living rooms. But beyond the economic realities, what are the big advantages that you've found living in this collective environment for yourselves in your personal lives?
Well, Margaret and Colleen, maybe you can speak to that first.
So I'm a little bit newer. I've been here for almost 3 years, and I moved in 2020, so during the pandemic. And when I was considering it, it was earlier in the process. So we were having Zoom meetings, and it was a little bit different. But also during the pandemic, it provided certainly me with companionship and just being part of a community that could get together. And we were, that was very unusual in those days, as everybody knows, right? So I remember at Christmas time, because nobody could go away to where they might regularly go to their family, we were all together and we had like 12 people around the table, which was kind of unusual in 2020 for sure. But other than that, the community feature for me has been really huge, to be part of the community and yeah.
And for me, I had sold my house about 3 years ago and moved into a small apartment on my own, and I didn't really like living alone so much. So what I love about being here is the shared dinners, because that's another, big community building kind of thing that we do a little bit every day of, and having my own really lovely private space where I can retreat to whenever I want and need to, but also just being able to chat with someone over, morning tea is really nice. And I've only been here not even a year, and I feel the relationships growing with people, and yeah, so it's nice to be feeling that community getting stronger for me, just feeling more part of it over time. And it feels like it's a resilient thing to be living this way.
Now, this all sounds very idyllic, and I'm sure it is most of the time, but there must be some challenges. What are some of the challenges that you guys face as a group or individually in this setting, and how do you deal with them?
Well, of course there is, and I think that we have a process that is part of our sort of procedures manual that we've developed, that we do have a conflict management process that we have used from time to time, and we certainly try to encourage people who are having any kind of interpersonal issues with someone else in the community. But it is a challenge, and we've worked really hard at it, and I think it's interesting because people that have left, one of the things that they've said is that I learned a ton. I learned a lot about myself, and those, I think people acknowledge the fact that living in community, you've got to be prepared to stretch. And certainly when we're talking to people who are interested in living this kind of living, it's important to have those kind of frank conversations. And it's but the other thing people say when they're considering living here is they're worried about privacy, but really no one who lives here feels that they don't have enough privacy, because we have our personal space is quite adequate for, most of us have a little couch and sitting area and desk, or that kind of stuff, as well as it's not just a bedroom. So people can gravitate to and usually do in the evenings if they're not out doing something else. So, but on the other hand, when you say, when you ask about how we manage the conflict, I mean, there have been people who ultimately, not that they've left because of specific conflict, but they've just found it's maybe for them it isn't the way they want to live, because you've got to be up for it. And it's not like they've left with some big blow up thing or anything like that, but over time they realize that the tension that they're feeling, they just realize that this is maybe not how they should be living. So people make those choices. We've really, the other thing I want to say is, because one of the things that Matt was talking about was the skills that people bring. And, we've certainly been really blessed with people who've lived here, And I say particularly maybe some of the men, I'm just pointing that out, but we've had guys who, know how to build stuff and fix stuff, and, they know the electrical stuff, and they know, all that stuff that requires, a certain amount of skill. So we've had, fences built and deck built and a shed built, and all by people, the shareholders that, who know how to do those kinds of things. So it's that's been something that's been really, and it also helps with the whole business, I think, of feeling like you're really part of a community when you're contributing in those kinds of ways to maintaining the home we all share. Yeah. So anything else?
Now, in society in general, it's fairly normal to live with roommates. It's usually something that, is commonly done at a younger age and as a renter. You want to talk a little bit about why you see this as a replicable model for people of all ages and for homeowners as well?
You guys want to speak to that?
A replicable model for homeowners and people of all ages. Yeah.
Yeah. Collective living isn't just for people in their 20s, I don't think.
Right. No. Well, it is lovely, to have the ages, the different ages in the house right now, because the younger people kind of bring in a certain type of dynamism, and the children lots of energy, and the older people the sort of listening and wisdom and fun too. It is a really nice group of people that get along really well at this time, and that's a real bonus. I think the house is pretty peaceful, and I think at other times there's been bigger personalities in the house that have, shake things up in different ways. But it's and there are a lot of relationships. If there's 10 people in the house, there's a lot of different relationships in that house, and and that can be really good, but sometimes you just need to go to your room and just hide out there a little bit for a while, especially as you're getting used to it and finding your own balance within it, I suppose, is what I've been finding. What else? Like roommates. Yeah, it's nice to have the different relationships kind of with different people close at hand.
I also think really that there's maybe a different expectation in a way in the, an older demographic, like not students, not the, late teens, early 20s group, which typically are roommates. But I mean, I think a lot of them, they don't have expectations of what they need to do they don't see themselves as part of a community. They just see themselves as roommates and temporarily, moving on, and they, whatever kinds of conflicts they have, they probably deal with them differently. But, I think when, you get, the life stage where people have raised children or, certainly dealt with, long-term employment issues, and, they've lived lives. There's more knowledge about how important it is to I guess just to get along. The other thing though is I think that it's a value system when you decide to live in a cooperative kind of environment. If that's not a value for you, then this isn't what you're going to even think about doing. So I think that makes a difference too. I mean, people have said, what do you do when somebody wants to buy a share and the community doesn't think they're right? And we haven't run into that a lot because most people self-select. They come and they look and they think and they stay for a bit and they just realize that, it's not for them, right? So by the time people are ready to become shareholders, they've usually, we've had those kind of discussions, and we kind of, we understand what their values are, and they understand what ours are. So, yeah. Mhm.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys again for being here and for sharing your experience in this unique housing structure, which is, not all that common. Most of the people we work with in co-ownership are living in buying properties with multiple houses or multiple suites on the property. But I really think, I started off by saying my background is in triple bottom line sustainability, right? Socially, environmentally, and economically sustainable. And this model of collective living certainly can help create that more than even more than any of the other forms. So it's really exciting to see the success of this model, and I look forward to hearing questions that people have for you about your experience when we get to that section. I'll also say we'll have details later, but that I believe you are looking for a new partner, a new
We
shareholder right now, and a new housemate.
Yes.
So if people are
Or
excited,
mates. Housemate or mates.
mates.
We'd welcome a couple.
So if people are excited about this model, definitely follow up, A, to see how you can replicate it, or B, to see if this particular home and community are right for you.
Mhm.
So thank you. We'll now move on to Ashley Pullman and Elizabeth Wilcox, who are two families who met through the Coho BC matchmaking services and came together to purchase a home in East Vancouver about a year ago. Less than that now, I guess. Oh no, a year ago. You may have seen them on the news recently or on the cover of the Vancouver Sun. It's been really exciting to have them kind of sharing their story and helping to spread the word about their experiences and about their property. And so we're delighted to have them here with us today. And Ashley and Liz, if you guys want to take a moment to again tell us your story, and then talk to us about what is working, why this feels like better housing for you, and similarly, what are the challenges that you've had to face and how have you overcome them?
Awesome. Yes, thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I will preface this by saying I have COVID, so apologies if I seem to be struggling a bit.
Otherwise, we would be in the same room
Yes,
right now.
exactly. Anyway, so we came together in July of 2021. So I was living with my husband and two kids in a 1-bed and den apartment in Vancouver. And we pretty much decided that we needed some more space. So we had been chatting about co-ownership for some time and really felt like that was the best way for us to be able to move and get the space that we felt that we needed and that we wanted. And so that was, and we were interested in, I think the big thing was we were interested in having a house with enough bedrooms and bathrooms for us, and having some backyard and a rec room for the kids to play. And so we decided that co-ownership was an option for us. And then pretty much what happened was we had a hard time finding a partner. So I had connected with Noam, and we put together an ad and put it in the Coho newsletter, and Ashley saw it.
Yeah, I did. At that point, me and my partner and our young son were living in a housing co-op structure. So we were living in East Vancouver, and so we had some experience living in about 40 units, about 60 adults who would be in meetings for the entire structure. And so we had been there for several years, loved it, loved the experience of living and sort of diving into collective decision making about housing. But we needed also a little bit extra space. So a lot of co-ops, it's hard to kind of come by those slightly larger units. And also, to be honest, we were, our income had kind of grown a little bit more. And we had a little bit of money and we're thinking, okay, we could probably, buy something if we wanted to, maybe an apartment that would be sort of similar to this. We also had some kind of doubts about sort of staying in a housing co-op where you are partially subsidized, even if it's not sort of a BC housing subsidy, you are, there's some federal subsidy that comes in, and we realized, this type of unit should probably go for slightly not our dual income earners. So we started thinking about making a move, and I kind of said, okay, I'm really curious about co-ownership, thinking through sort of different models. After being in sort of a large cooperative, I was really curious about doing a slightly smaller unit. So I was thinking maybe one partner or even 2 to 3, depending on what would work. When we started thinking about it in terms of staying in East Vancouver, we realized we probably needed to go small. Although there's a lot of co-housing projects that are starting to pop up, they tend to be sort of larger new builds as well. So I kind of said, okay, for a year, let's just see what comes up. Like, let's see if we can kind of push this. And if it turns out that we're not, finding a foothold or the right partner, then we'll think about sort of the next step from there. And so I saw Liz's ad and basically just was like, oh, it looks like they want to be in East Vancouver. It looks like they have a similar sort of like family structure, lifestyle in terms of, kids are going to bed at the same time, and a slightly similar budget as well too, although ours was stretched very high. And so basically responded to Liz's ad and just kind of exchanged a few emails. And then we had sort of a Zoom call where we just sort of discussed, hey, what are you into? What are you looking for? And then we met up in person once without Noam, and then we met up with Noam, and Noam started asking, okay, I'm trying to think of the questions you asked, but you were like, I remember one of them being like, do you have any annoying habits that the other person should know about? And I think in retrospect, like, you don't really know your annoying habits, right? Like, we don't necessarily know the most annoying ones. But I think the biggest sort of tell of getting to knowing each other was just actually going to open houses. So I said, okay, let's start going to open housing and see if we can find a model that works. And there, it's really, even on paper, if you're like, this is what I want, this is what I'm looking for, when you start to look at a place, and then after discuss sort of as a group, with this work, you start to realize actually your own preferences are a little amorphous, or your own preferences can be bent and swayed in different ways. And so it was kind of an interesting process of starting to refine what we actually were looking for, but together. I think neither couple had a firm idea of what they were looking for. I know we had some like a high list of preferences, having a backyard, but in terms of the exact type of housing structure that we thought would work, there was definitely a lot on the table, which we look for. So Liz, how many properties did we look at before we kind of started to put some offers in?
I feel like we looked at about 6. We put an offer on one that didn't go through, and then a couple houses later, we found our house, which was very exciting. I think initially on paper we didn't think it was the house for us, and then when we went in, it's a it's got 4 levels. Initially, it was separated all into 4 units, and once we had a look at the house and had a look at the floor plan, we decided that we could split it up into 2 separate units. So we pretty much duplexed a house is really what it comes down to. So we both have just completely separate living spaces. So we both have 3-bed, 2-bath, own kitchens, own living space, and that. So it's really like living in a duplex in Vancouver. So yeah, and we were able to get that technically for under $1 million each, even though then there were some additional rental costs and things like that. But technically for what it was going for in Vancouver, and the other things, for instance, that I had looked at, we'd looked at other condos, we'd looked at units in Langley and Squamish and all over the place, trying to figure out what to do and where to move. And when we focused on this house, we got it for under $600 a square foot in the end, which was, so we got significantly more space than what we could have gotten in a condo. And we got the backyard and all of the extra things we wanted. So even, yes, there were some compromises, like Ashley said, but pretty much once we found a good partner, which we just connected in July, and by November we'd bought a house. So it was very fast, much faster than I had anticipated.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
certainly was some momentum kind of coming into it. In a lot of ways, I think there was no red lights that came up for us in terms of, Liz and Tom. I was like, oh, I don't know if they would be good partners. If anything, it just seemed like, oh no, increasingly these would be good people to do this with. It seemed like we also had a firm understanding of where we wanted to live. I think there was a real commitment to trying to stay in where we had both lived for years and years and trying to stay in our community. And also just really trying to make something unique take place, whatever that would be. And so, yeah, so basically we've lived in it now for a year and 3 months. More or less, we've had ownership, and in many cases, it's like having now somewhat of a traditional neighbor in some ways, but much more closer, where we have a shared living space in the basement. So there's this kind of big playroom there. We've sort of, it was always a long time of in terms of like, what are we going to do with this space? But it just sort of morphed into like, oh, actually, there's 2 woodworkers in the household, so we have a little bit of a wood shop down there. The yard had sort of transformed into a really nice common area. And then otherwise, we just kind of, yeah, we get to hang out. A lot of our, I'd say, interaction is when all the kids are kind of coming home from daycare, and at the end of the day, people are busy making dinner, and the backyard is full of like, conversations like, how's your work day, and so forth. We try to have dinner, not as much as the Rare Birds Co-op, but I would say we're pretty good at having dinner, once or twice a month, or just even sharing, like if I make too many pancakes, sending them a WhatsApp and seeing if they want to come up or something like that. So it's been really lovely to have, I think, really close neighbors, but at the same time, a little bit more of that your traditional side by side. We don't have a formal structure in terms of meeting, which is interesting because coming from the housing co-op, where you would have an annual general meeting, you would have 2 to 3 months a large meeting. You'd also have subcommittees where you would having say like biweekly or monthly meetings. So this has been a much more informal structure so far. In many cases, it's interesting going from that, like, the housing co-op, we had Robert's rules, for example, in terms of decision making. We've kind of come up with a new process of making decisions and sort of talking about things a little bit more on the fly. And then also when it comes time to making a decision, I think we kind of present almost like an idea or an emotion to each other, and we sort of look for agreement. It's much more, I'd say, a more organic sort of consensus building. There's no way you could vote on a motion or vote on a decision with 4 people or 2 couples, like 2 couples. And so, for example, there's been some stuff that I've wanted to do in the backyard, and every time I bring it up, Liz is like, I don't know about that. I'm not sure if I'm ready. And then I'm just like, okay, that's cool. Let's just revisit that in a year, revisit that at a later date when we come up with a better idea, or we come up with an idea that works for everyone. And same with me. I might, either Liz or Tom will come an idea and I'm like, I still need to wrap my head around that one. Right. And then it just kind of pauses for a moment. So in some ways, there's certain decisions that aren't necessary right away, and we're able to kind of work on them a little bit over time, continue to sort of talk about it until we find something that we think everyone's on board with. And yet when it comes time for making a decision and there needs to be a decision made right now, say it's an emergency or something happens, it's very quick in terms of what happens. So a good example is we replaced kind of a door, like our decking area, and then on this first big rain, last November, it started like leaking through the roof. We ended up being out of town into Liz and Tom's place. And obviously, mortified that we had let that happen. But yet, as soon as we're back, like first thing, that gets fixed right away. It's like we're able to sort of act swiftly and quickly when it comes time to it, and yet also think through decisions and kind of build an idea together over time if it doesn't require an immediate response. Is that fair to say, Liz? Any thoughts about collective decision making?
Yeah, I think, it definitely takes communication and collaboration. I think those are kind of some important pieces that we have to kind of think about and be cognizant of. But otherwise, I mean, yeah, I think it's like you said, it's definitely a bit of an organic process for us. Yeah. Yeah. And overall, I think, I just harken back to a couple things that some other people have said, like it's great to have another couple kind of invested in the house and helping with the work on the house. So similar to what Matt said about the Horseshoe Bay properties. So that part's really great. I also think that I was never under any illusion that I'd be able to have my own house. We were always going to have a tenant or like something, or live in an apartment with lots of neighbors. So part of that is like this way we got to, have a say in who we live with that and like choose our neighbors in that sense. And it's a much so I feel like that's a humongous bonus. And it was just really helpful. That sense of community, definitely grows, even though we didn't know each other initially. Because like shortly after we moved in, my husband had to go into the hospital for 5 days, and it was very quick and a very stressful time. And Ashley and Chris had me and the kids over for dinner every night for 5 days. So, when I couldn't like manage anything else. So it was, yeah, that part was really fantastic. So that piece is definitely growing, and it's great to have this investment together.
Thank you. So first off, I want to apologize to Ashley for the typo that's just been staring me in the face on her name right there.
It kind of sounds the same, right? Pullman. Yeah, like it's work.
So it sounds like there's some big advantages you're talking about here. Financial, right? Getting a lot more space than you would have otherwise gotten. Social, the interpersonal connections, access to yard, and then you've also created some shared space for kids' playrooms and workshops. So that's of course what draws us into this. You talked about a little bit about challenges, and that sometimes what you want to do there isn't consensus over it. Are there any other examples of challenging moments you've had over the last year that you want to talk about and how you dealt with them?
A lot of the challenges over the last year have been not particular to co-ownership, but just to like buying a house and having a house. And, I wouldn't ever, it's really a stressful time to like both buy something, you're like, this is our one financial thing that we're going to do in our life. Like, you're not coming to this rich. This is such a big decision. And then to make a move, and to kind of, be in a new place that needs work and needs, you're constantly finding problems. So a lot of the challenges I think we faced over the last year and a half have not been particular to co-ownership. If anything, I would say Liz and Tom have made that easier. And in many ways, we're sort of commiserating together about things that come up. And you're kind of like, oh, this is a shared experience of someone else also, feeling a bit stretched, whether it's from making too many decisions or, just having almost this part-time job of moving, right? So I think that's my response is like almost that kind of, someone who's new to this would probably say, I wonder if you ask this question in 2 to 3 years, how the responses will change. So
is that an offer to come back to a future session? Thank you.
I really think for us, it's just kind of more of like a business arrangement. Like we were fortunate to be able to together to have a down payment, and then to get the rest of it sort of in line with getting into the market in Vancouver and not being subject to all of the problems that we're currently facing, rent evictions and people moving in and all of these Vancouver specific, the mad rental prices and stuff like that, that are pretty much equal to a mortgage payment, but no one's got the down payment, right, to make that piece up. So I think some of that, like together, we could overcome some of that stuff. And that's what I really think. I mean, buying a house is stressful in any time, on our own. If we'd bought something, we might be faced with all of the same problems that we have in a co-ownership in terms of having to sell or having to move or just random things like that come up. But so I guess like for me, that piece wasn't like the actual home buying and the massive amount of money like wasn't a huge deal in that sort of sense, because that was stressful. That would have been stressful no matter what happened. It's very nice to know that we have somewhere like to live long term, um, even if yes, we have to still deal with the same hardships we'd have whether we were in a co-ownership or no ownership situation. And I guess I really feel like this type of model, um, if people can come together and get the down payment, obviously I recognize that that's piece is a hurdle, but I really see that as helping, um, or working for some folks to get into the market and have stable housing in a maybe semi-affordable, you know, in Vancouver terms, and it's like can really work for folks instead of these older houses going to developers and getting turned into fourplex that then gets sold for millions and stuff like that. So I really see it as a way for regular folk who obviously, do have some money to get in. So yeah, I think that that's also why the co-ownership piece is very important to me.
I'd say also just one extra challenge to kind of highlight is that a lot of whether it's a sort of a government program to support, renovations or, the Canada Greener Home Grant, or whether it's even just speaking to someone at, Vancouver, it's all premised on like a single sort of family model in terms of how those policies and programs are structured. So one challenge that I think we have is like what it means to have a single title, but to have two families within that. There's very little sort of structural support for sort of navigating that. So I'd love to see, various programs, whether at the municipal, provincial, or federal level, sort of start to support some of these models in various ways. I think that would be really help promote it as a potential sort of system of reconsidering how you have home ownership.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes, this is a growing field, and our systems need to adjust. Coho is here to help you through it, but with a little more government support, it could definitely take this much further. Thank you, Ashley and Liz, for your story and your experiences. And again, if you're able to stick around and take some questions at the end, that would be fantastic. So our last speaker today, or speakers, I should say, are David and Judy Hale. As I may have mentioned earlier, they owned a house in Victoria and chose to sell 2/3 of it to friends, neighbors down the block to help fund their retirement and to build a more supportive environment. And now they're helping others to do the same thing. So David and Judy, if you could share your story, and similarly, what has made it successful and what are some of the challenges and how have you dealt with them?
All right. Well, thank you, Noam. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge you for being the ambassador and for doing all the press and doing all the heavy lifting for us, and just opening this up to BC wide. And it's a pleasure working with you. Just want to acknowledge everyone that's on the call tonight, and especially the presenters. Thank you, because you inspire me. As well as, sometimes it's easy to sort of feel like you're on your own doing this thing. And people look at you sometimes sideways. I've been, selling real estate for 30 years, and I'm just totally amazed that I have never really had another realtor come up to me and say, hey, I really like what you're doing. Tell me about it. Let's go for coffee or lunch, so it's amazing how slow this has developed over the years, and I'm just so pleased to see that it's gaining traction lately. I guess our story started back in COVID as well. That seems to be a theme tonight. We've been snowbirds, Judy and I, for the last 8 years or so, and traveling into the southern states to find the warmth in our motorhome. And we came back because of COVID. We had to kind of scurry back And we had people renting our house, and of course, we got back early. They couldn't go anywhere. They were supposed to go to Europe. So we ended up on a property, a friend's acreage out past Souk. And so we just kind of settled in there and let our tenants stay. Just, nobody could really go anywhere at that particular time. And so over a period of time, we started, Judy and I, started to think about, should we sell the suite? And, we have a 3-story townhome that's in the picture here. The bottom floor is a suite. It was actually a bachelor suite, and then made an area for our teenage son as well. And then so the top 2 floors are pretty well separate. We had never thought about selling the upper 2 floors, but one day within probably 15 minutes of each other, we came up with the same idea and said, I have an idea. Why don't we sell the upper 2 floors to Derek and Melissa, who were friends that we'd known for a while. They had a little 2-year-old at the time, and they were cramped into a 550 square foot condo up at Bear Mountain. Their little guy had come along, so they gave him the bedroom. Their bed had to go into the living room. The couch had to disappear. And then the lady from hell moved in downstairs and started banging on the ceiling with a broom. So their life was a little bit on the miserable side. They felt they had to be outside constantly with the little guy. Anyhow, they were walking on eggshells. So they were over the moon when we offered them the upper 2 floors. It was a really good deal for them. And that was about 3 years ago. And of course, prices have gone up substantially since then. So anyhow, we put the deal together, did a joint venture agreement, 5-year term is what I like to do, because that's the best, usually the best mortgage situation, the best interest rate, etc. And we're just down the road from a school. The Galloping Goose is on the back side of the property, so it's good for cycling and walking. So basically it's working out really well for us. Like when we go away, there's always somebody there. Even if we rent out our suite, there's somebody around in the building to sort of keep tabs on things. So it's been a real great situation for us. And I think what I'll let Judy do, if you're willing, is to talk about this more the social aspect, because she's the one that's that's on Facebook, and she's the more social one in our partnership. Are you there, Judy? You're still on. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, just wanting to make sure that I wasn't going to have interference. So I'm at one end of the suite and David's at the other end, and we want to make sure that one of us was muted, I think, so that there wouldn't be any interference, but it seems to be okay. So, I heard the ladies, I think it was Ashley and Liz, talking about how it was pretty organic with their communications, and that's pretty much the way it is with us too. We text back and forth, see how things are going, how's your day going, things like that. Oh, you're homesick today, okay. Like just being considerate of what's going on for everybody. And Melissa and Derek were away for the last week, so we went up and checked their place, make sure everything is okay, watered the plants, and things like that. They had a parcel that we brought in, and it's just really great to be able to pay back sort of the things that they do for us while we're away. And when there's any issues, we just deal with them, with like it's got to be something big to have a meeting. typically we'll say, oh, we're home now, let's have a dinner, and that's the way that goes. Or once since we've been home, we babysat their little guy Jackson, and he's such a thrill to have around. It's like having another grandson. He's so sweet, and we all just really get along. So there was something I was going to talk about. Oh, I know, it's about the financial part. So we split up everything 2/3 and 1/3. So they have 2/3 of the house and they pay 2/3 of the mortgage and 2/3 of all the expenses, and David and I pay 1/3. So I look after paying all the bills, and once a year, we take a look at the previous year. So like I'll do that in January for this year. And we take a look at how much we have been contributing towards the fund. And every 2 weeks, we put money into a joint account for our mortgage payments. And then once a month, on the first of the month, we put our monthly amount in that pays the strata fees, because we are in a strata. Strata fees, power bill, water bill, cable, that sort of thing. So Wi-Fi. And it's been working out really well. And and our taxes, we contribute towards the taxes every 2 weeks as well, when we put money in for our mortgage. So everything's just been working really, really well. And I remember the first year a plant died in the front flower bed, and Derek said, "Do you think we have money in our fund to like put a rhodo in there, a red rhodo? It's always been my favorite plant," So things like that are just really, like, it makes my heart feel good to be able to do that, because it's important. It's really important. We have this house, and it didn't make sense for two of us to be having so much space that we didn't need. And they're lovely people, and I love to be able to share with them. Yeah.
Thank you. So you hear a lot about people doing this to get into the market, right? Buying in, maybe because they can't afford it, or kind of to create something. You've done the other way. You guys were already in the market. Do you want to talk about some of, you just referred to them a little bit, but a little more about the advantages of why you think this is a great pathway for people who already own real estate?
Oh, I can answer that. For me, it's about being able to age in place. I know I didn't expect to be moving to the lower suite so soon. I didn't mind doing the stairs, but some people have that issue. Like my sister and her husband, they have just sold their house in Lethbridge, and they have to move to something that has no stairs because neither of them can negotiate stairs. They're both older than us, but nevertheless, they've waited a bit too long. And I don't have to wait until I have mobility issues. Hopefully I never do, but here we are. We don't have any stairs to negotiate. So that's definitely a benefit. And having younger people around to be able to help out with various things around the yard. And, if you need a helping hand to lift something or whatever, Derek's always there to help. So there's another thing. And God forbid we get snow once a year. They're out there shoveling, right? So so those sorts of things, that's what comes up for me right away. What about you, David?
Well, I always thought when we bought this property about 10 years ago that the suite being on the ground level would be perfect just in case something happened to one of us. So I've always kind of thought that right from the get-go that that was really important. So I think what Noam was saying was that this is a model that we can promote for people that are getting on in age, that have a good amount of equity in their homes, that can sell a portion of their home to take on people that are younger, capable of fixing fences and cleaning the eaves, and the older person or couple can take off down south. They could free up some money to buy a place in Phoenix or Palm Springs, or buy that motorhome they've always wanted. So it's allowed us a lot of freedom to travel in our motorhome and be semi-retired and travel across Canada. And we've traveled around 2/3 of the states. So it's a model that has freed us up. And we're loving it. We're living the life.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you guys for being here today and sharing your story, and David for the work you're doing in helping to promote this important form of housing. There was a comment here from someone that says, selling or sharing your home is also a good pathway in the case of separation or divorce, to allow the family, or at least half the family, to keep the home but allow the other party to move on, which I think is absolutely true. And we're also seeing a lot of interest from single parents because it's tough to be a single parent. And so you can come together and really create those support systems in a number of ways. So yeah, lots of reasons why this might make a lot of sense. So we're going to move into the question and comment phase. So people can prepare their questions. I'm just going to quickly tell people about how they can get involved with Coho BC. There's a lot of resources on our website, the guide to co-ownership, questions that might go into a legal partnership agreement. Our YouTube channel has a lot of our past sessions, including other conversations with co-owners events, conversations with lawyers, with financiers, with folks about how to make this work, how to make it work successfully and such. We reference our matchmaking services, right? Liz and Ashley, who met each other through this group. So please do, if you're looking for a partner, fill out our Find a Partner survey, respond to a classified or write your own. Well, there's a few typos in here, apologies. Our matchmaking happens through supporting you in connecting with your friends and family, if you're looking to do this with them, but also through our surveys and through our classifieds and also through our events. So we have an online event on September 26th to meet other people, and we do local tours and things in the area. So stay connected. You'll all be added to our mailing list. Hopefully you choose to stay on it. If you unsubscribe, we won't take it personal, but you'll find out about things going on. And of course, you can reach out to us directly to talk about your particular situation and create your own consultation. We do have a couple of interesting events. We're about to go into our August hiatus, but on September 12th is the What is Co-Ownership and How Can It Work for Me info session. Again, please come and join us. A lot more information around the details. You'll also get a video of that when we add you to the list if you're new. Our matchmaking event on the 26th, I've said, and an interesting session in October about collaborative real estate investment and financial considerations when co-owning, especially maybe a property that you're not going to live in. If you want to invest in a friend or family member, or if you want to get into some group crowdsourcing real estate pathways. We do have a number of interesting properties we're involved in the resale of shares of. This is a half a house in, oh, those are not the right pictures. These are half a house in East Vancouver, where you have your own suite, your partner has a suite, and you rent out a suite for income. That really also helps to underwrite a lot of those outside costs. 2044 Turner, definitely worth checking out and setting up a viewing if you're interested in. And as I mentioned, the Rare Birds Co-op has a share for sale, looking for a new partner at a really reasonable price compared to all the other entry points that would, to get a condo on your own or a house. And it's an amazing property, huge home. You have that private area that they refer to, but also a lot of collective space. And more than just the tangibility of the house, you have that community aspect and that support. That's really exciting. So please do reach out to me for more information about that property. And in general, really thank you all for coming today. Thank you especially to our guest speakers for sharing their stories and volunteering their time to help promote this model and help support you all in your vision. And we'll open the floor to questions. I'll start with a few seem to have come up on the chat already, which is great. So we'll start with those, and then if people want to unmute themselves and ask a question directly, we're happy to hear from you and see your smiling faces. So the first question here is for Mary and the Rare Birds community. Do you share your process with interested co-living explorers? So do you, and yeah, tell us about how you kind of can help others to replicate what you do, and a follow-up, and yes, you addressed this in your question a little bit, but do any of the shareholders not live in the property, and how do you deal with your investor partners?
So the question about the shareholders not living on the property, yes, we currently have a couple that are shareholders. They've never lived here. They've been interested in investing. They actually live in Saskatoon, 2 provinces away. But it's interesting because they're very involved. They Skype into our meetings and they come to our retreats, and they're quite they're active in a variety of ways, and they've been helpful. I think that one of the things we've talked about is we prefer not to have more, shareholders that aren't on the property, that aren't living on the property. So what happens with our external shareholders, I guess I'll call them, is that their suite is rented, and they get some revenue out of that. So we have a long-term agreement with what we call co-occupants that live here, not shareholders but are renters. So there's a lovely young couple from Brazil that are living in that space currently. And do we share our processes with interested co-living explorers? To some extent, we do have we're certainly open to any kind of conversations. We have a very extensive document that we call our flight manual, and a lot of work has gone into that, and a lot of expense has gone into that. So we do have that available for purchase if anybody wants to purchase it. It's $250 to purchase that, and then it's yours to do with what you want. But aside from that, we're certainly happy to have conversations. There was another question, I can't remember what it was.
Do you allow guests? Do you have space for people to come?
Oh yeah,
stay in the
space for
community?
guests. Well, currently the space that's available, we can have for guests. And if anybody is interested in joining the community and they're wanting to explore, we definitely don't just encourage them. We expect them to spend some time in the community. So they would come and live here with us for at least a week, and just really experience what it is to live in the community. And they're happy to do that. I mean, they want to do that. So yeah, it's a space that's available for anybody who's interested.
As well as just guests, family members that are coming to stay and visit as well.
Matt, I know that the Horseshoe Bay Cottages also have some outside investors. Do you want to talk a little bit about having that as part of your community?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a really important point with that is all of us being the resident owners, we're so excited about trying to find a way to live here. I'm talking when we were putting the deal together before we closed on the property. We're so excited about that, and that's why we're all here. So it's hard. It was initially hard for us to see why anybody would invest from the outside. Why on earth would somebody do that? And then we, because we wanted the home ownership, and they're not going to get that. But then we had a bit of a paradigm shift, and we realized, hang on a second, this is actually a very compelling investment, because in our business model, our outside investors, we have a few parties. First and foremost, it's not just open to whoever, because they have a voting share, and that could be problematic if they don't share our same values. We would only really consider people that believed in co-housing and had shared values. I mean, one of our investors lives in a different co-housing place elsewhere. Another one are interested about it and plan to maybe live in co-housing one day. So they were doing it because they supported us and they wanted us to succeed. But secondly, just from strictly an investment and financial standpoint, we all had a paradigm shift. And I think maybe probably Noam, you probably maybe did as well. You maybe didn't see the potential in this, how it's actually quite compelling because first of all, they can come in to real estate ownership on a sliding scale based on their ability, which is a little bit of a rare opportunity, right? Typically you have to come up with a set amount. Secondly, we pay down the mortgage and the housing charges, you know, property tax, all of that, everything that we're responsible for. They're not responsible for those recurring monthly payments, yet their investment still grows and the mortgage still gets paid down that they own a portion of. So it's actually quite a compelling investment if you look at it that way. But it took us a while as a group to realize that because of how excited we were about the housing side of things. And something I want to acknowledge, I know it was a ways back now, that the Rare Birds group spoke to is how when you're getting into this, you anticipate all these issues and these worries and concerns. And it turns out when you actually start doing it, a lot of them just work themselves out. And there's a lot of serendipity in terms of, you know, you don't hear a lot of the concerns that you thought you would. Like for people always ask us, how did you choose who goes in what unit? It kind of just worked itself out. We have a few larger ones. We have a few couples. We have one even larger one, but we have a mom with two boys. We have people that like privacy. They have a private yard. We have people who have dogs and they have a little bit of grass. So it just kind of was serendipitous, and not to be wishy-washy and say just rely on serendipity, but a lot of it really does unfold as it should. And that's kind of a mantra that we have here is things unfold as they should. I think that relates to our outside investors because the right people kind of presented themselves and it felt right. And they felt good about the investment. They felt comfortable in it.
Thank you. There's a couple general questions here about co-ownership, and I'm going to race through, give some very quick answers, but given the time, I'm going to just encourage everyone to come to our intro to co-ownership presentations or reach out to us directly for more about the tangible options. So someone asked, does 3 or 5 year mortgage term allow for a fixed date for the agreement to either continue or for another party to sign off? And yeah, I mean, there's a number of mechanisms you can do. You can go into this with a fixed time frame, and then at the end of that time, you decide whether you want to renew it, or you can go in with an indefinite time frame, maybe with a minimum, right? At the 5 year point, you can start an exit strategy. So there is flexibility in how you structure the relationship and how you structure the legal agreement and the financing to facilitate kind of whatever model you're looking for. So someone asked, what happens when one party wants to sell? Again, we go into there's a lot more detail in other pieces, but in very quick form, there's a 3-part exit strategy in most arrangements. One of your partners buys you out if they can. If they can't, you go look for a new partner who is approved by the others, right? Is going to be a good partner, not just someone who's going to buy the share. And then if there isn't a new partner and they can't buy you out, there's a pathway where you say, okay, this has been a great relationship for 5, 10, 35 years, but now it's time to sell the property and move on. So we create these mechanisms in your legal agreement that play that out. And then someone else asked, kind of, there doesn't seem to be much available at my price point. Are there any options at lower price points? And again, this is kind of where the creative options like Matt's, like the cottages and the Rare Birds can provide more fair affordability options, right? Through collective living or through these unique properties and using outside investors. So again, it depends on your situation and what initiatives are around, but there are definitely some options. And then does cash help? I mean, certainly if you come in with cash, we like to talk about how you can get partnerships where somebody who has cash but not a great job and mortgage qualification can partner with someone who has less cash but great mortgage qualifications, and together you can buy where separately neither of you could buy. So there are certainly a lot of advantages there. Going back to the questions specifically for the panelists, we have here one that's having a great underlying question. How do you have enough trust in strangers to co-own with them? I mean, Matt, Ashley, and Liz, and the Rare Birds, you were all examples of stranger groups. Dave and Judy, you were with a friend. But yeah, what do you do to build that trust to feel confident in co-buying? Any of you can answer.
I think ultimately you just kind of have to jump in. Like, to be honest, like this idea of, is there a point when I felt like, oh, I really trust Liz and Tom with our financial future? And like, no, you're just sort of having to kind of go out on a limb and say, like, I hope this works well, to be honest. Like, I certainly trust them. Absolutely. Now we've built that, but there was no point in time where I could say, now I have enough trust, right? Obviously there was we sort of built a relationship, but it was a short period of time to build that. I think the one thing I would say, rather than just trusting them, knowing that they really were committed to a similar future that we also were committed to. So we want to have our kids in our neighborhood and have them grow up here. We all have jobs and we all seem like we really want to continue working in those jobs. We all seem to care about our credit score and want to make sure we don't default on our mortgage. So there seemed to be a similar sort of value in terms of committing to a place and committing to sort of financial viability for our personal selves as well too. So I would say that is what I was looking for. So sorry, I realize someone else might want to speak though.
I was just going to say that we're much too scared of each other. There's a membership that Judy and I belong to. It's called Boondockers Welcome, and it's our favorite motorhome membership. And there's 3,500 places that we can stay with other people on their property for free. And you'd say, why would somebody do that? And it's just because people love people, and they're either in a situation where they had a hard time finding a place to park their motorhome, or they're wannabe travelers, or they may be getting a little bit too old to travel, and they want to stay in touch with that RV community. So that's my analogy for the shared home ownership thing. I mean, we have to learn to trust a little bit more and quit being so scared of each other. That's my sermon for the night.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it looks like you wanted to add something. I mean, you guys also do trials, right? You have people come in and actually kind of live in the space and build that relationship.
You talking to us?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, it's an interesting question for me because I really haven't spent a lot of time, and I don't know that any of us have, in terms of do we trust each other? I mean, it just we spend enough time, I think, talking about ourselves, each other, our lives, our expectations, our values before we actually jump in. And was it David was talking about the motorhome group that I'm been part of a travel club, and we do the same thing. It's a reciprocal thing. You pay an annual fee and you get names of people all over the world. You just email them and go live with them or stay with them for a few days when you're traveling, and it costs $20 a night. So, but you're in strangers' homes, and then you, as part of the club, you are expected to host in your home. So, yeah, I mean, we really, I just don't think about, I guess I don't worry about trust much.
Affordable Travel Club. Yeah, we're members too.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And I'll just add, this is, when it comes to co-ownership, you really do your due diligence, right? You don't just, oh, you have the same price, I have the same price, let's go buy, right? Ashley and Liz talked about the dating process they went through and some of the weird questions I asked, but really trying to find those trigger points and make sure they're having the important conversations. Matt and the Cottagers went through a 6-month process of creating that vision and structure. The Rare Birds allow you to come and stay for a couple of weeks, or maybe even rent for a while before you move in, right? So it allows for due diligence and for process and for a chance to really get to know one another.
And one of the ways I've described it is, it's like in the beginning, it's like a dance. Before you just go back and forth. You're in a dance until you decide you're going to actually get married.
So a couple more questions, then I want to be respectful of people's time. We're past our 8:30 window. So the question here about the price of someone coming into an arrangement, I'm assuming that question was for the rare birds, but maybe it's just in general. You know, is the price based on the percentage share of the current market value? And the answer is often, usually, right? You know, someone wants to get out, they'll figure out the current market value and resell their shares. But sometimes there are models that are what we call fixed equity co-ops that, you know, where you can have a return that's based on inflation or some other mechanism that's not market driven. So, I mean, I know the rare birds share, you know, you guys don't necessarily revalue your share every 5 minutes when the market shifts up and down. You just try to have a more stable share structure. Want to talk a little bit about that valuation?
Yeah, that's right. We reevaluate our shares every 3 years based on you know, an assessment, and that's not just you know, your tax assessment. It's we get someone to come in and do an assessment of the home, give us a market value, and we have adjusted our share value based on that.
So it is a chance to ride the market and build equity as the market goes in most of these relationships. There's a question here about mortgages. If you want to sell a share of your home, and do you have to pay out your old mortgage and then take on a new mortgage with the co-owners? And the answer generally is that's often the way, though depending on who your mortgage is with and the structure of it, you could potentially have somebody assume the mortgage, come onto the mortgage with you. Some of the credit unions have a little more flexibility, allowing that person to then re-leverage as well. So it'll really depend on, you know, do they need additional financing? Are they just going to join your current financing? Who your bank is with? So it's a case-by-case basis. So one of the advantages of these assumable mortgages now with these low interest rates is people are buying into relationships like this house that I'm selling on Turner with historically low interest rates on the mortgage, and they're able to take that over, and that creates another pathway to affordability in this environment. Matt says, oh, you want to talk about your shareholders agreement and legal representation?
I was just answering the question that if we have legal agreements between us, and yes, we do. Something that sometimes we forget as a group, and I do try to stress when possible, is you know, there's shareholders agreements and things like that, but ideally they end up being a fallback, and we're able to just discuss things. Something that is interesting about this type of model is, you know, we're kind of on both sides of it. We're the landlord, we're the property owner, we're also the tenant. So really, if everybody's in agreement, we can kind of do what we want as long as everybody's in agreement. And then we have legal structure to fall back on if we're not in agreement. And if you look at it that way, it becomes more just a series of conversations, because more often than not, we're really not that far apart on important matters.
And the last question we had here in the chat was, do all the panelists have legal co-ownership arrangements with their co-owners? And the answer is yes. You know, the exact structure of that legal agreement can change depending on how you choose to do it. And there's different terms for it: joint venture agreement, partnership agreement, co-ownership agreement. They're basically synonyms. Shareholders agreement with each other. But we definitely encourage all of our crew to, you know, anyone who works with us to do that, to have that legal and social structure laid out in advance. Because when you do hear about these stories going wrong, it's inevitably somebody who just partnered up with a friend, bought a property, said it'll work out fine, and then years later their, you know, life changes, their relationship changes, and they don't have the thing to fall back on. So best to do that when you're best of friends, and when you're, you know, thinking in the visionary stage, and when your interests are aligned, and that agreement will deal with worst case scenarios. And then you've got those protections for everybody when things, you know, change. So definitely highly recommend. And we have, as I said, the lawyers on our crew we can refer people to with lots of experience with that. So is there anybody who wants to ask a question verbally at this stage before we call it a night? So then, again, a big thank you to our speakers, a big thank you to everybody who came out for all your questions and for all your interest. And really, we look forward to seeing you in the Coho community. Reach out to, the Coho email, or to myself if you're in Metro Vancouver, to David if you're in Victoria, and we have other members of the network across the province. Do visit our YouTube channel to see other sessions. Do come to other events, do fill out our matchmaking survey, and we hope to help you find the right home, the right community, and set you up for success in those endeavors. So
Thanks,
Thank you,
Noam.
Noam.
Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you.
Noam. Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Appreciate it. Good night,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
night.